Welcome to the Foundation course. As you go through this course, you'll see that it centers on youth and primarily youth, but we want you to remember that here at the YMCA of Springfield, our focus for protection is also going to be on any vulnerable populations. That might be older people, people with disabilities, people whose English is not their first language, or immigrants without citizen standing. All are groups of people who may be taken advantage of. So let's begin.
Child sexual abuse can be a difficult and uncomfortable topic to discuss. While we do our best to present information through a trauma-informed lens, we acknowledge that the content may be difficult for some to process. Everyone will respond differently. We encourage you to practice self-care. Mentally and emotionally prepare before beginning the course. Take a break and revisit the course later if the information becomes difficult. If you are unable to complete the training, please reach out to your supervisor or program director to discuss alternative learning solutions. Child sexual abuse is a significant problem, but it does not have to happen. Training like this is an important step to prevent a child from being abused and suffering adverse effects. Thank you for your willingness to learn about this sensitive topic. By the end of the course, you will have a better understanding of the scope and impact of abuse and be empowered to identify red flag behaviors that fall outside of the acceptable zone. Manage high-risk situations where abuse is more likely to occur and respond to and report red flag behaviors and suspected abuse with confidence. This course will take approximately 45 minutes to complete. Lesson 1. Scope and Impact of Abuse. Child abuse is more common than you think. In fact, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, 1 in 4 females and 1 in 13 males will experience sexual abuse by the time they are 18 years of age. Contrary to many beliefs, it is not always the scary-looking stranger lurking in the shadow that abuses children. Research shows that 90% of child sexual abuse is perpetrated by someone known and trusted by the child or the child's family member. Only 10% of incidents are committed by a stranger. That's right. An abuser is most likely to be someone known to the child, like a respected teacher or community member, the coach everyone loves, or even a close family friend. You can't identify an offender by appearance, occupation, or gender. The truth is that offenders can be any race, national origin, gender, or age. That's why it's important for you to understand the full scope of abuse. Offenders must have 3 things to perpetrate abuse: access to, privacy with, and control over children or youth. Access is the first condition that must be present for abuse to occur. An offender will do whatever is necessary to gain access to children: become a youth pastor at a local church, volunteer to be a camp counselor, or babysitter for a family friend. Offenders may seek employment or volunteer opportunities at organizations like yours to gain access to youth. Offenders also need privacy. Privacy means interacting with a child or youth without being observed by others. An offender may look for opportunities to be alone with a child in a physical or virtual space. Locations like an empty locker room, deserted stairwells, or office with the door closed are examples of physical locations an offender might use to be alone with a child. They may offer to drive a stranded child home or invite a child on a camping trip to be alone with them. They might also use social media sites and messaging apps to exchange private messages with a child. The third condition an offender needs is control. Control means using power and authority to influence a youth's behavior or emotions. One way offenders gain control is by manipulating a child and adults into thinking they are a good person, someone that is dependable, who can be trusted, and who loves to lend a helping hand. They may spend days, weeks, months, and even years establishing control over the child they want to abuse. This might be surprising, but did you know youth-serving organizations are just as likely to have an incident of youth sexually acting out or abusing another youth as an incident of adult-to-youth abuse. In fact, a little more than half of the incidents reported to Praesidium are in regard to incidents of youth-to-youth abuse. Youths of any age or gender, from preschoolers to teens, can act out sexually. Sexual interactions may stem from natural curiosity. However, it is not appropriate to allow sexual interactions of any kind to take place in your organization. While it might seem harmless or even age-appropriate, this behavior can quickly escalate to abuse if not addressed. Regardless of the age of the offender, sexual abuse has a profound effect. Later in this course, you will learn specific strategies for preventing and responding to youth-to-youth sexual activity and abuse. Who's at risk? Youths with behavior problems may be isolated from other youth, making them more vulnerable. And even if they disclose abuse, they may be dismissed or are assumed to be lying. Can you identify characteristics? Youths with disabilities may require extra care and may not be able to protect themselves from abuse. That may make youths more vulnerable. Youth who do not have positive adult and/or parental relationships vulnerable and put them at a higher risk of being abused. Youths who are shy and don't have many friends may be easier to influence and/or control. These characteristics are not all-inclusive. Any child or youth can be at risk for abuse. The impact of abuse. Youth who experience sexual abuse may experience long-term effects of trauma. Abuse can affect how survivors feel about themselves and others. They may find it hard to trust. They might even find it difficult to form healthy relationships and suffer short and long-term emotional and behavioral problems, such as depression and substance abuse. For example, as an adult, survivors are 3 times more likely to suffer from depression. They are 4 times more likely to experience PTSD, as well as 4 times more likely to develop symptoms of drug abuse. Warning signs of child sexual abuse can manifest in a variety of ways, including psychological symptoms, behavioral changes, and/or physical signs. Psychological characteristics can include anxiety, easily overwhelmed by everyday activities, withdraw from activities and friends, sudden loss of interest in activities they used to enjoy, avoid certain people. Behavioral characteristics can include self-harm, may develop eating disorders or physically harm themselves. Addiction, become addicted to prescription or illegal drugs. Fearful and/or non-trusting of others, find it hard to develop healthy relationships. Sexualized behaviors, act out sexually or have knowledge of sex beyond their developmental level. Physical characteristics can include limited activity, finds it difficult to sit or walk, pain, complains of discomfort when using the bathroom, and infection, displays signs of a sexually transmitted disease. Keep in mind, not all children will exhibit the same signs of abuse. Any significant change in a child's behavior may be an indication that something is wrong. For example, you observe a child who has been on the A honor roll for the last year and now they are failing, or a child who never got in trouble displays frequent behavioral problems. Just because a child exhibits these or other changes in behavior does not necessarily mean they are being abused. Sometimes when you notice a change in a child's behavior, the best thing to do is ask if everything is okay and report your observations and concerns to a supervisor. Susie loves basketball and always wanted to go to practice, but has suddenly expressed dislike for the game and avoids practice. Let's listen in as Susie and her coach talk.
Hey, Susie. I noticed that you haven't wanted to go to basketball practice the last couple of weeks. Tell me about that.
I'm no longer starting and barely get any playing time, so what's the point?
But you love basketball. Is there anything else going on?
I love basketball, but I just don't like practice.
Why don't you like practice?
I don't like changing in the locker room because some of the kids keep messing with me.
In this situation, you may have uncovered a potential problem. Immediately report your observations and Susie's responses to a supervisor. Sexual abuse can have psychological, emotional, and physical effects on a survivor. These effects aren't always easy to deal with, but with the right help and support, they can be managed. Learning more can help you find the best form of care to begin the healing process. Keep in mind, not all survivors are affected in the same way, but the impact for all is real. If you or someone you know is a survivor of childhood abuse, there is help. With support, survivors of childhood abuse can heal. Select survivor
So as I
resources to
select
access
this, you have
impactful
seen the
resources
information
or
about 988, but
select
we
the
want to also
logos
point
to
out the
access
National
these
Sexual
resources.
Assault
When
Hotline,
complete,
as well as
select
the
Next
website
to
that they have that
continue.
goes along with that.
National Sexual Assault Hotline 988. Lesson 2. Red Flag Behaviors and High-Risk Activities. Boundaries are limits and guidelines used to draw a line between what is and is not acceptable. Oftentimes, offenders will cross boundaries with children and youth prior to the abuse. They do this to desensitize and test the boundaries of youth and other adults. Experts call this grooming. There are 3 types of boundaries: physical, emotional, and behavioral. Let's take a deeper look at each. Physical boundaries. An offender may test physical boundaries by touching a youth in acceptable ways, like sitting next to the youth, giving high fives, pats on the back, or side hugs. Once a youth becomes comfortable, the offender may gradually increase the frequency and types of physical contact. Sitting next to the youth might evolve into the youth sitting on the offender's lap. A pat on the back may evolve into a back massage. A side hug may evolve into a long front-facing hug.
We want to point out one other common kind of entry into this physical boundary, and that is hairstyling or hair grooming. So here at the YMCA, if it's a sport, someone needs help with putting their swim cap on, or their hair needs to be a certain way for their competition in gymnastics, then the staff can help with that. Maybe they're on the playground playing and their hair is just in the way, they can't see a quick ponytail holder or whatever it takes to make sure that they can see and play without their hair in the way. But sitting, grooming, braiding, brushing, we don't do that adult to child to adult, or child to child.
Physical boundary violations can be so subtle. Before the youth realizes what is happening, the offender may pretend to accidentally touch the youth's private body parts. Emotional boundaries. An offender may test emotional boundaries by spending an excessive amount of time with youth to make them feel special, even loved. They may share personal information to make the youth feel they have a special bond or relationship. An offender may even act possessive or jealous when a youth spends time with others. When emotional boundaries are crossed, youth might find it hard to believe someone who loves them could abuse them. Behavioral boundaries. An offender may test behavioral boundaries by manipulating youth to do things they would not usually do, like keep secrets, lie to their parents, use drugs or alcohol, and watch pornography. The youth may think of the offender as a cool friend who treats them like a grown-up. When behavioral boundaries are crossed, youth may be reluctant to tell on the offender because they would have to disclose their inappropriate behaviors as well. There is an increased risk for abuse and false allegations when boundaries are crossed and inappropriate behaviors become the norm. Offenders may gain access, privacy, and control by crossing one or more of these boundaries. It is important to know and follow your organization's policies. It protects everyone.
I'm going to pause here for a minute to kind of point out that what you're hearing in terms of policies and minors, we want to remind you that 25% of our employees are minors. So when you're at work, you're on the same team. Doesn't matter your age. If you're a lifeguard, if you work at the front desk, you're on the same team. The same expectation is for everyone. And then within that workplace, you have a way that you communicate using the approved communication method or tool or app for that department, and that's how you interact with the employees. But when you step outside of work, it is not appropriate for an adult to have a relationship with a minor that might involve social media, Facebook, knowing their phone numbers, going to their home. The policies that you hear in this and you'll read in the policy manual will also apply to people who are employees when they're outside of work.
In addition to maintaining boundaries, it is important that you can identify behaviors that fall outside the acceptable zone. Think of the acceptable zone as behaviors that are acceptable in your organization. Behaviors like high fives, side hugs, and encouragement or praise statements are examples of behaviors that might fall within the acceptable zone in your organization. Red flag behaviors are behaviors that fall outside of the acceptable zone. Think of them as warning signs that a youth might be at risk for abuse. Red flag behaviors often go unreported, especially when an individual's behavior is appropriate 90% of the time. It can make it easy to overlook the 10% of the time when the behaviors fall outside the acceptable zone.
So I'm going to stop it there just to make sure that I'm bringing up to your attention this 10%. Because really the way that predators get to kids is they get to kids because they've groomed the adult to overlook that 10%, to feel like, oh, they only do it sometimes. We don't overlook that. We make sure that we understand that this is 100%. So please listen to your gut and act when you see these slight or what would appear to be small boundary crosses. We want to make sure we're reporting those.
Zone. Do not ignore behaviors such as excessive hugs, touches, roughhousing, sharing inappropriate information, and showing favoritism with a particular youth. When red flags are ignored, they could escalate into abuse or, at the very least, allow those behaviors into the acceptable zone. By reporting these concerns, you are not accusing anyone of being an offender. In fact, making sure these concerns are addressed is in the best interest of the adult crossing boundaries, so they are not falsely accused of abuse. Also, remember that youth-serving organizations are just as likely to experience an incident of youth-to-youth abuse as adult-to-youth abuse, so watch for red flag behaviors in youth as well.
In this thing, we're going to be able to be moving what is the appropriate things into the acceptable zone.
Drag and Great job. Remember, behaviors that belong in the acceptable zone are side hugs, giving praise, high fives. Red flag behaviors that cannot go in the acceptable zone are excessive hugs, excessive touching, share too much, and favoritism. Not all red flags look the same. They can often differ based on the age of the offender. It is important to be able to differentiate a variety of red flags. Examples of adult-to-youth red flags can look like a volunteer acts more like a youth than an adult role model, talks with minors privately through social media, a coworker meets with kids in private with the door closed, frequently tickles and hugs youth, or makes inappropriate comments or jokes. To review, boundary crossing and red flag behaviors are very complex and differ among cases, but research shows that although child sexual abuse cases differ, behaviors leading up to the abuse remain common. Researchers have categorized these behaviors into 3 levels of concern: enhanced, moderate, and high risk. Each category representing behaviors that could lead to a case of child sexual abuse. Enhanced risk behaviors are roughly 2 times more likely to lead to abuse. Moderate risk behaviors are roughly 4 times more likely, and high risk behaviors being at least 6 times more likely. Take a moment to review the previously discussed behaviors and observe where they exist in the chart. When ready, select Next to continue. Remember, youth-to-youth abuse and sexually acting out is different than adult-to-youth abuse. Youth-to-youth abuse is typically more opportunistic and spontaneous. Generally speaking, pay attention to youth who use sexualized language or behaviors, taunts or harasses other youths, violates others' boundaries, dominates other youths, or avoids adult supervision. Here are a few additional tips to help prevent youth-to-youth abuse. Group children together by age. If possible, children in groups should be no more than 2 years apart in age. For example, you might have a group of children ranging in age from 5 to 7 and another group ranging from age 10 to 12. If children of different age groups are together, always be aware of their interactions. If a child makes sexually explicit remarks or gestures, supervise them closely to ensure their interaction with other youth is appropriate. If you observe a child who displays sexualized behaviors, immediately notify your supervisor. Supervision is key to preventing inappropriate interactions between youth. Always try to maintain a line of sight of the youth in your care to ensure proper supervision. Next, we are going to discuss some high-risk locations and activities where abuse is more likely to occur and how to supervise those areas strategically. Some locations and activities can be difficult to supervise, creating a higher risk for inappropriate behaviors or abuse. High-risk locations and activities make it challenging to restrict access, privacy, and control. High-risk locations include bathrooms, locker rooms, stairwells, empty rooms, and areas with obstructive views, such as playground equipment with mazes or tunnels and rooms without windows. Public areas shared by individuals outside your organization are also considered high risk. In addition to high-risk locations, there are programs, activities, and times that may increase the risk of abuse. Take a minute to consider the programs and activities offered by your organization. Do you have unstructured or free time before and after your program? Do you transport youth to and from activities? Do you have youth participating in overnight activities? If you answered yes to any of the questions, you have high-risk activities. Activities that are less organized and provide free time for youth do not mean free time for staff and volunteers. You must remain vigilant and watch for boundary crossing and red flag behaviors. Managing high-risk situations can go a long way in protecting the children in your care. Practices to help avoid high-risk situations can include, but are not limited to, avoid one-on-one interactions by having multiple people supervise. If you find yourself alone with a youth, remove yourself from the situation or ask another adult to join you.
We want to clarify this because it seems to point out that if you're in a one-on-one situation, you just can walk away, and that is not an option. The YMCA operates with a rule of 3. If we are supervising children, there must be at least a minimum of 3 in the group. That can be 1 adult and 2 kids, 2 adults and 1 kid. So you get the picture of that. So this is everybody's job. This is not just the job of the person who's caring for that. So we want every staff person to be watching for this. So perhaps you see a camp counselor going down the hall. They're one-on-one with a kid. I want you to stop them. It looks like you're in a situation of a rule of 2. We need to have a 3. I can be your 3, or what can we do to solve this? So you want to make sure that you are being proactive. If you're a child watch and your other coworker leaves early for some reason and you're all of a sudden in a rule of 2, call out on the walkie-talkie or the phone and let somebody know I'm in a rule of 2, I need an assistance. This is everybody's job to make sure that you intercede and you assist to make sure that we are always working with a rule of 3 situation.
Designate isolated areas as off-limits except with adequate supervision, such as bathrooms, stairwells, or empty rooms. Lock unused rooms and closets. Be an active presence during transport. Do not nap or use your headphones. Provide some structure by allowing youth to select from a small number of activities. Then ensure that they are adequately supervised. Can you think of a time when you observed an interaction with a youth that made you raise an eyebrow or think to yourself, Something's just not right. What actions did you take? As someone who cares for or provides service to youth, you have a responsibility to do all you can to keep them safe. Responding to and reporting red flag behaviors and reporting suspected abuse is critical in creating and maintaining a safe environment for everyone. By responding, you may save a youth from the effects of abuse. Youth who have been abused are at an increased risk of self-injury, drug and alcohol abuse, and depression. Protect survivors and prevent the abuse of others. Offenders often abuse more than one youth. Many times the behavior continues until they are caught. Prevent a false allegation. If someone is exhibiting red flag behaviors, they are placing themselves at a higher risk to be falsely accused. Influence your organization's policies and best practices. By bringing attention to the lack of or gaps in policies, you could reduce the risk of an incident. Here are actions you can take if you observe behaviors outside the acceptable zone before the behavior rises to the level of suspected abuse. Interrupt the behavior. Interrupting the behavior can be as simple as making your presence known or discreetly reminding a colleague or youth of an organizational policy. Redirect the behavior. Redirecting the behavior immediately stops the behavior and allows you to help bring the behavior back into the acceptable zone. Report the behavior to a supervisor or program director. Although you have interrupted and/or redirected the behavior, you must report it. Responding to behaviors outside of the acceptable zone does not have to be awkward. Let's watch an adult-to-youth interaction and experience appropriate ways to respond. Matthew is a 24-year-old new employee who joined the team 2 weeks ago. Jill is a shy 5-year-old girl. You observe Jill sitting in Matthew's lap as he reads a book. Select each button to experience appropriate ways to respond.
In just a second, I'm going to select those buttons and show you. And just in a couple earlier comments, she said it didn't have to be awkward. But I'll just tell you, in this scenario and the next, they kind of make it look awkward because it looks like they're sitting in just a meeting at a desk. We would not do it that way. So let's take a look at what interrupt looks like.
Hi, Matthew. I observed Jill sitting in your lap. Remember, that is against policy.
So
Interrupt.
That's factual, but it's not helpful. Let's look at redirect.
It's great to see you reading a story to Jill. Why don't you have her sit next to you so others can enjoy the story as well? Select next to watch a youth-to-youth scenario.
What we want to look for, though, for Springfield YMCA is a combination of redirect and then added. So when we look at the redirect,
it's great to see you reading a story to Jill. Why don't you have her sit next to you so others can enjoy the story as well?
And remember, that's
Select
against policy is what you want to do.
Youth. Elizabeth is an outgoing 10-year-old girl who has been in the program for 2 years. Amanda is a creative teenager who is new to the program. You observe them in a corner using the naptime blankets to build a fort where they cannot be seen. Select each button to experience appropriate ways to respond.
I want to remind you that this is not just the job of a supervisor. This is coworker to coworker. This is employee to employee. This is what we want to do. So here's interrupt.
Hi, Elizabeth and Amanda. Remember, the blankets are only for nap time.
This is redirect.
Hi, Elizabeth and Amanda. Mr. Matthew is reading a story to Jill. How about you join them?
And remember, the blankets are only for nap time. We want to make sure that both the message about the why is included with the redirect.
In both scenarios, behaviors were immediately interrupted and redirected, but our work is not done. We must report the behaviors. The sooner you respond to and report red flag behaviors, the more likely you are to prevent abuse. Lesson 3. Respond and report suspected abuse. Previously, we interrupted and redirected Elizabeth and Amanda's behavior. Now, all that needs to be done is to report the behavior to a supervisor or program director. But wait, Haven't we already done enough? If we report the incident to the supervisor, couldn't Elizabeth and Amanda get in trouble? Might the supervisor blow the whole thing out of proportion? After all, Elizabeth and Amanda are good kids. You may find yourself second-guessing if you should report red flag behaviors to a supervisor. Don't talk yourself out of it. Don't minimize or rationalize red flag behaviors you may witness. Notifying your supervisor of red flag behaviors is just as important as reporting suspected or known abuse. Reporting red flag behaviors and known abuse is critical and may prevent harm to a child. We acknowledge barriers to reporting can exist. Here are some common barriers to consider. Unclear organizational policies and reporting requirements. If you are unclear about your organization's reporting policies, now is a great time to talk with your supervisor or program director. Failure to see the larger pattern of behavior. By notifying your supervisor about red flag behaviors, you can help your organization determine if the behaviors are part of a larger problematic pattern and determine the most appropriate way to handle it. Fear of accusing someone in your organization of abuse. Reporting a boundary violation does not mean that you are accusing someone of being an offender. They just might need more coaching on proper boundaries with youth. Other common barriers include fear of confrontation and/or retaliation and not feeling supported by leadership or colleagues.
I want to pause about these last two final, the fear of confrontation, retaliation, and not feeling supported by leadership. If that is the case, that's not acceptable in this YMCA. So if you're feeling that, we want you to reach out to your supervisor. If your supervisor is non-responsive, we want you to work your way up the chain. That is not acceptable or tolerated within our organization culture.
If you have second thoughts about reporting red flag behaviors and/or suspected abuse, remember it is critical and may prevent harm to a child. Always err on the side of caution and report red flag behaviors or suspected abuse to a supervisor. We all have a moral responsibility to report abuse, but as someone who cares for or provides services to youth, you may have a legal responsibility to report suspected and known abuse. So, if you suspect abuse, take the following steps. If the child is in immediate harm, remove them from the situation. Next, report to your supervisor and ensure the authorities are notified.
We're going to pause there because we do talk a lot about making sure we fill out reports and do we know what's going on, but really what we want you to do is stop the action from happening and then activate our internal response. And our internal response might include 911 and DCFS. We are going to take action first and then we'll do the paperwork later.
There may come a time when a youth discloses abuse to you. It might be a vague comment about not feeling safe around a particular person or place, or they may directly tell you someone is hurting them. Imagine how difficult it must be for the youth to share their experience. The way you respond is critical. The first step you should take if a child discloses abuse to you is to remain calm. Your initial response can affect how much the youth tells you about the abuse. Take a deep breath and prepare to listen. As you listen, focus on the details of what the youth is sharing and show compassion. This is not the time to pass judgment or criticism. Simply listen and believe what the youth is telling you. Reassure the youth that disclosing is the right thing to do, and thank them for being brave enough to share their experience with you. You can also reassure them that they did nothing wrong and ask how you can help them feel safe. You may need to take immediate action to remove the youth from the situation or separate them from the person who made them feel uncomfortable or abused them. As soon as possible, document what the youth told you. Use the exact words the youth used to describe the incident. Don't try to determine the mindset of the alleged abuser or youth. Stick to the facts only. The final step is to report. Follow your organization's internal reporting policy and report suspected abuse to local authorities. Investigating and fact-finding on your own could interfere with your organization and the local authorities' ability to conduct a thorough investigation. How should you respond? Drag and drop the yellow key terms over the correct description. If incorrect, the key term will return to its original location.
So we start with take a deep breath and remain calm. The next thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that we are listening to them and getting the details. Then we want to reassure them they've made the right choice to let us know. And then we want to document by using their exact words. We don't add anything. And then we do the report.
Well
We're going to
done.
pause here and really have you take this in, because this does happen. It happens at the YMCA more than you would think. And that's not youth, it's adults. And I will tell you that almost every department, no matter what it is, has had somebody, a member, an adult, an employee, a guest, report. So this is happening from kids in programs, teens maybe in the gym, adult and youth members who go to the desk, or adult members who go to a fitness instructor. So every employee needs to be ready to respond for when this might happen. So again, remain calm. Make sure your face and your body language matches your tone. Listen to what it is and reassure them. Then stop and do our internal reaction of what we need to do. Make sure they're safe. Then we're going to document, and then we're going to report.
How you respond to suspected or known abuse matters. If a youth discloses abuse to you, follow these steps as well as your organization's reporting policies. A mandated reporter is required by law to report abuse and suspected abuse or neglect.
So I am going to be putting us through this thing just to tell you that the YMCA is by law a mandated reporter organization. You, as our employees or volunteers, are agents of us, which means that we are required to report suspicion of abuse. We don't investigate, we don't prove it, we report our suspicions, and then DCFS and law enforcement would take it from there. We cooperate fully with them, and every employee and volunteer is required to cooperate. So let me see if I can get this to move on so that we get to the next
For
section.
a list of mandated reporters by state, refer to the Mandatory Reporters of Child Abuse and Neglect located in the Resources tab. If you are still unsure if you are At Praesidium, we believe child abuse is preventable. In fact, everything we do is to bring awareness and provide abuse prevention knowledge to organizations like yours. Before you wrap up this course, take a moment
This is
to
a review
re-examine some
section. We're
important
going to do this together,
tab
so
to
we're going to
review
skip to the next.
An offender must have access, privacy, and blank in order to
I hope that you
perpetrate
said
abuse.
control out loud or
So-
in your head.
Correct. An offender requires access, privacy, and control in order to perpetrate abuse. An offender may test emotional boundaries by encouraging a youth to spend time with others. Select the best possible answer, then select the Submit button. True or false.
If you're sitting there wondering, it might be true, it might be false. This is kind of a head noodler, but the answer is false, because they don't encourage the youth to spend time with others. They are trying to restrict the youth to only spending time with them.
Correct. An offender may test emotional boundaries by encouraging a youth to spend time with them instead of with others. What should you do if you find yourself alone with a child?
This
Select
answer
the
to
best
this
possible
question is
answer,
one that we
then
want
select
to
the
make sure you
Submit
do.
button.
You remove yourself
Call
from
the
the situation.
local
No, really
authorities.
what we want you to
Remove
do is
yourself
we
from the
want you to,
situation. Share
I'm
personal
sorry,
information to
let me go. We want you to create the rule of three. So make sure that removing yourself really means uphold the rule of three.
Correct. Remove yourself from the situation. Notifying your supervisor of red flag behaviors is just as important as reporting suspected or known abuse.
True.
Select correct. Notifying your supervisor of red flag behaviors is just as important as reporting suspected or known abuse. Which
This
professionals
is from the
are
mandated
most
reporter. I'm
correct.
just going to answer it.
Teachers, principals, and school personnel are most
YMCA
commonly
employees.
mandated to report suspected or known abuse. The The work you do matters. Your dedication and commitment can make a difference in the lives of children and youth in your care. By partnering with Praesidium, you've taken the next step in stopping abuse before it starts. Thank you.